Hey, it's Brian from Moment to Ponder. I'm going to do a screencast here for episode 66 of my podcast. I hate screencasts. I tried to do a screencast using screencast software. I had to do it this will be the fourth time I've gone over this, so I'm doing it this way just to get the thing to work. It's kind of starting to anger me. Excuse me. And I really hate doing them this way, pointing the camera at the screen. It's bad mojo, but whatever. So I'm going to turn the camera around here, point it at my laptop, and you can enjoy the loveliness that comes out. Pardon the camera work. There's my eye. Alright. So this is Moment to Ponder, episode 66. Why do we prepare? And like I said, this is kind of an overview of the episode more than in depth. Go to the momenttoponder.com to check out the podcast. And the podcast itself is going to be significantly more in depth than this. Also, help support Moment to Ponder by buying websites at bubweb.com. Websites starting at $10 a year. There's my pimpin'. $10 a year. I can see that very often. Check it out. So, why do we prepare? What events are we preparing for? Well, events close to home. Job loss, right? Somewhere near 8 million people lost jobs during the recession. Now, what do they mean by the recession? It's kind of a vague term, but let's say in the last 3 years or so, right? 3-4 years. 2 to 3% of all Americans lost their jobs. Now, that includes someone that just came out and people that are almost dead. So we're talking babies to near corpses, 2 to 3%. So of actual people that are working, you're talking 10 to 11, 12%, somewhere in that range of people that actually lost their jobs. Now, some of those people got new jobs, whatever, but job loss is something you need to prepare for. These are examples. It's not all inclusive by any means. Remember, the purpose of Moment to Ponder is to think for yourself. I'll throw some ideas out there, and then you work with them from there. Snowstorms on the East Coast. Earlier I think it was in October, but it may have been early November. Freak snowstorm on the East Coast. It wasn't actually all that high of a quantity, for snowstorms per se, but there's power out for over a week in places in New Jersey and New York. I had a buddy, a friend on Facebook. His power was out over a week. He was complaining it was cold. He had to go into, some businesses in town that, or a couple towns over or whatever, that did have power. To keep warm during the day and stuff. If you'd had a little tiny generator, one of those little 1,000-watt generators for $100 or whatever, $150, he would have had enough to run his furnace. Okay. Terrorism. 9/11. Now, if you were on one of the planes, there's not much help for you at that point. There's only so much you can prepare for. You can't prepare for everything, unfortunately. But Springfield, Illinois. Excuse me. Ooh, big yawn there. This happened a few weeks ago. The water plant in Springfield, Illinois, got hacked by some Russians. And they hacked the SCADA system, which is a supervisory control and data acquisition. Basically, it's the computer that runs the valves and the pumps and all that stuff. They turned the pump on and off every 3 seconds until it died. These things aren't meant to turn off that on and off that fast. So, it burned it out. They just set the program to do that. Now, there's default passwords, backdoors, etc. on all these systems. They weren't intended to be connected to the internet when they were designed 10, 15, 20 years ago. The internet wasn't that big a deal, right? So they didn't think about it. They were protecting against somebody on site getting in, so they had a simple password. They have back doors built into them that it's fairly easily to research that information and just find out what model system somebody has and try the default password. It's probably used there. These systems run the power systems, water systems, sewer, transportation, nuclear plants, refineries, other infrastructure systems. In fact, the Stuxnet virus, which you may or may not have heard of, was created specifically. Now, this particular virus, it was a worm/virus, right? It was created to go into one system in Iran's uranium enrichment program, so that to not blow it up, but to destroy it, right? To cycle these motors too fast or whatever to where they freak out and blow up because they're pretty sensitive equipment. And then they installed it in other equipment that could talk to other things, and eventually it found its way there, and it worked. It was probably designed by the U.S. government. That's the going theory on it. There's some other new viruses out there that are similar because people found this Stuxnet's everywhere. It's in a lot of these systems. Now, it was only designed to do one system and ignore all the others, right? Very sophisticated. They found it in all these other systems, and people have reverse engineered it, and they've created all these others to go in and maybe deal with somebody else's. So you could lose power, you could lose water. What if they got two subways to crash into each other? All these things are run off these simple systems, and there's very little to none that have proper security. If you want to know more about that, there's my hand. If you want to know more about this stuff, check out the podcast. I go into a whole lot more detail about that. Movie disasters, right? The things that we should prepare for that are in the movies. But you know what? They may happen, some of these things. Go back. There you go. Wow, this is awesome camera work. You gotta love this. EMP solar flare. EMP is electromagnetic pulse, which can be created by a nuclear detonation in the atmosphere, which really the detonation itself wouldn't harm people per se, because it would be too far away. It wouldn't create fallout, wouldn't create nuclear bad stuff, but it would create this giant electronic pulse that basically anything that has wires in it those wires would turn into antennae, and those antennae would increase this pulse would fry basically anything electronic. Therefore, your cars, your computers, the entire electrical system of the United States, or maybe not, depending on where it hit in the world. But usually it affects a whole hemisphere at a time, either the northern or the southern, and it would be most unfortunate. A solar flare can do the same thing. A really massive corneal ejection of the sun. Basically, a big chunk of the sun blows up, and it shoots out this massive energy, which when it hits our atmosphere does the same thing. Happened on September 1st, 1859, to where it was blowing up telegraph wires, catching telegraph poles on fire, and bad stuff. Fortunately, at the time, that was basically the only electronic technology out there, so the damage was minimal. It was to the telegraph infrastructure. Versus now, everything's electronic. Your cell phone won't work, your regular phones won't work, your computers won't work, unless they're specially secured and all this, and that's not really the scope of this discussion. It would put the hurt on everyone. Assuming, let's take a nice conservative view and say it only blew up 1/3 of all the transformers in America. And we'll even say it didn't do anything to Europe or anywhere else, just America. Well, we wouldn't have the manufacturing infrastructure available to rebuild those transformers, because the power would be out. problem there. Those machines take electricity, and, well, to get electricity there, you need the transformers that they build, and et cetera, right? Now, so let's say Japan or China could make these transformers for us. How long would it take for them to make 1/3 of the transformers in America, ship them over here, and then install them? The minimum, you're talking 6 months of power outage, at the absolute minimum. You know, could be years, especially if it affected other parts of the world. I mean, this would not be a good thing. The New Madrid fault line. In 1811, 1812, a quake of 7 to 7.5 happened. Actually, there was 4 of them. Happened on the New Madrid fault, which is just south of St. Louis in the Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee border area, right, along the Mississippi River there. It was so strong. Now, 7.5 isn't really all that strong. I mean, it's strong, don't get me wrong. But people in California would be like, it was a 7.5, you know. The underlying rock structure in central United States is significantly different than the West Coast there. And it carries a lot farther, and it amplifies it in different ways. I'm not a geologist, but let's put it this way. 7.5 went halfway across the country and rang bells in Philadelphia. Rang church bells in Philadelphia from the shaking of this that happened in St. Louis area. If that happened today, and it's on like a 200-year cycle, they think, somewhere in that range, because about 200 years before that, it went off. Scientists say, you know, they have all these magical science things that they can tell us about this stuff, but not only did it ring bells in Philadelphia, it made the Mississippi River run backwards for a while. It moved the Mississippi River several miles in places. There's parts of Illinois on the west side of the Mississippi River. Illinois is on the east side, right? That was the border. But there's a couple of towns in Illinois that are on the west side of the Mississippi River because of this quake. If that happened today, it would destroy Memphis. Memphis does not have the earthquake building codes that California has. Neither does Chicago. It may do some pretty significant damage all the way up into Chicago. It's not that far away. St. Louis, probably not a good place to be. But let's assume that you're not anywhere near those places, right? Along the Mississippi River is a bunch of refineries and chemical plants. That infrastructure would be destroyed, and all these chemical holding tanks could release their toxic goo, and you would destroy the Mississippi River from St. Louis south for a significant amount of time, years upon years. This, between the oil, the petroleum products, and the farm chemicals and fertilizers, and oh God, it would all the way into the Gulf Coast. You thought the oil spill down there with the well that blew up? Nothing compared to what this is. Plus, it will also destroy a significant percentage of the United States refinery capacity, and a bunch of pipelines to the East Coast, all that. So you know, assume you're in Washington State or California or New York State, you will still feel the pain from this, economically and otherwise. So what do I do, you may ask? Well, first of all, don't panic. These things may or may not happen, but you need to have a clear head to deal with it no matter what happens, right? So prepare. Well, how do you prepare for the earthquake? You don't. You prepare for the lack of infrastructure, right? Not a specific disaster. How do you prepare for losing a job? You don't. You prepare for not having the means to get more money. Lack of infrastructure. You know, if you have to have them turn off your power to their house because you can't afford it, you know, maybe you have a wood furnace or a wood stove or something, you can live without power. Probably, you know, most people can't. That's not really the point here. But if you have food, laid up, 6 months, something like that. People that keep a year, good for you. It's not reasonable for most people though, right? Have some money available, a small generator, whatever. More importantly than things are skills and knowledge. So if and when something does happen, you have the skills to deal with it. Because let's say you have a generator for your furnace and all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. What if that thing dies? If you have skills and knowledge how to heat your house without the electricity portion, fine. Or let's say it's an extended 3 month or 1 month. Let's go with 1 month. The likelihood that most people can keep a month's worth of gas to run their generator, to run their furnace and lights, is pretty minimal. I don't do it. I've got a week or so worth of gas, and that's rationing it quite a bit. Okay, suck some out of one of the cars because you only really need the gas in one, etc. Maybe I can go 2 weeks, using it as needed, very sparingly. I am not going to have, where I live, the ability to have a 500-gallon gas tank in my backyard and, have gas forever. So I'm going to need the skills and knowledge. Let's say there was a month, for whatever reason, that the power was out. I'm going to need to be able to know how to heat my house without that, or do all these other things. The knowledge is more valuable than the goods, because you may not be somewhere where goods are available. If you weren't at home where all your stash is, how are you going to deal with it then? Now you've only got what you've got on your body or in your car or whatever, and now you got to get home or whatever. So think of those things. I don't want to let this go much longer. Like I said, we can get a whole lot more detail in the podcast itself, which is significantly longer and much more detailed. You know what? Thanks for watching this long, if you've made it. Sorry for the bogus screencast thing. Like I said, it's boring. I'm going to have to figure something out that's a little bit better, but for right now, it's what we've got. Check out the podcast for more details, www.momenttoponder.com. Also, feel free to click down there on the like button, comment down there, subscribe up there. That's up at the top usually, depending on how we're looking at this, unless YouTube's changed it all around since last time I looked. But anyway, go there. Also go to themomenttoponder.com. There's a nice blog there. You can comment and talk and back and forth. Also on Facebook, A Moment to Ponder Podcast, Twitter, at Moment to Ponder, blah, 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 blah. Bunch of jazz. Thanks again for watching, and have a great and fantastic day as always.